Hello and welcome to another episode of the Odyssey Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Mullally. Today I interviewed Torrin Minutillo from Elite Growth Mastery. I hesitate to call him a business coach because I think Torrin would agree and others would agree that he's much more than that, but that's the best description I can give him for the context of this interview. But Torrin's going to be talking today about what his business is and what the Elite Growth Mastery process is, as well as his background and experience leading up to this point. So without further ado, here's Torrin. Welcome, Torrin. Thanks for coming down. I know you came a long way, so I hope you bought your passport when you...
I did, mate, yeah. Had to go over the river to the other side. Yeah. I got lost halfway, but I got here. Thanks for that, mate. It's really good to be here and do this, actually. It's cool.
Yeah, brilliant. And I will go easy on you, like I said.
All right, mate.
So,
yeah, go easy.
So, as we know, you're currently a business coach for Elite Growth Mastery.
Yep.
And first, what I want to do is actually sort of take a walk down memory lane and go back to when you first started, because you started or bought a business quite...
Long time ago.
Yeah, when you long before my time.
yeah, probably before you were born. Actually, when were you born, mate?
97.
97, yeah, well before that.
Yeah.
So that's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
I bought my first business, it was July 1989, so it's 30 plus years ago now. So it was pretty scary. It was just a video library back in the day when we used to actually have video libraries before Netflix, and people used to go and buy and hire videos to put in and watch.
You mean you had to leave? You mean you had to leave your house?
You had to leave your house. Yeah. I was actually thinking about today. That was before mobile phones. Can you imagine that, running a business without a mobile phone? It's incredible. But yeah, so that's what it was. So I started a video library, and I did actually start it. I bought it with a mate of mine, and we borrowed, I think it was 110,000 at the time, which is probably equivalent to $500,000 now. So that was pretty scary, but I wasn't scared, just went into it. So yeah, it was cool. So that was the sort of kick off for my first business journey.
Yeah, first business venture.
Yeah, first business venture, and then then it sort of kicked on from there.
Yeah, so you said you were 24?
So just under 25, so I was about 24 and a half. So,
yeah. Yeah, and because you were quite young, was there sort of any major challenges that you were sort of unique to you because you were at that age, buying a business?
Probably not so much unique because of my age. It's probably unique in that I didn't really know what I was doing, you know.
Yeah, so you didn't have like a background in...
No, I didn't have any business training or other, just basically was enthusiasm and wanted to do that. I think I always had sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, I know now that probably on reflection, it wasn't really an entrepreneurial spirit. It was just more of get out there and do things for yourself and have a crack. Basically, was how I looked at it back then. So I look on reflecting now. So it wasn't so much. I didn't sort of at the time. You don't think about that you're having these problems or whatever. It's only on reflection when you look back and now you learn and you get wiser about these things. You go, I could have done that a whole lot better or a lot different. You know, so. Which is good to look back on and learn from. But at the time, it's very difficult to have those lessons, you know, because you're going through it.
Yeah.
But so what was the question again? It was what did I learn from it?
Yeah, if you had any unique challenges because
of your age. Yeah. No, not unique, not really. I mean, I was just enthusiastic and it was just sort of go, try and do the next thing, which was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so since then, you've I think owned, is it 8 businesses or more?
This business, coaching business, started a year or so ago.
Yep.
Officially is my 9th business. I had 8 businesses, but 3 of those initial businesses were video stores. So we ended up going from 1 to 2 to 3 with a couple of people involved. And that sort of went for about a 4 to 5 year period before I then moved on to the next thing. Did you want me to...
I also want you to elaborate on what those businesses...
So the first 3 were video libraries. So so we sort of ended up at one point had 3 going, and then eventually sort of got out of those and we ended up one mainstay with one guy. And then I sort of got out of that, got into a maintenance business. So it was just like a home handyman type maintenance business. Again, sort of trained myself to do a few things. I was pretty handy, so went into that, and then sort of from there I evolved in and I bought a mobile seafood business, which was cool, which is interesting. But that actually took me around the countryside, so sort of got out of the metro area and I was doing country runs, selling seafood around to farming areas and things like that. I did that for about a year and a half. Ended up selling that and did pretty well out of that. Sort of from there, we ended up with a ice cream shop in the middle of Freo. So that was a like cafe style ice cream. So people who know Freo will probably know the old Simo's brand, which is down from Dunsborough way in the southwest. So we had that for 4 or 5 years. What else
so you owned that brand?
Yeah.
I used to go there all the time.
Well, we actually, it was like a little franchise, if you like.
Yeah.
But the main brand, or the main guys that owned it, were all down in Dunsborough, and then we had one in Freo. I think it was one in Mandurah and one in Margaret River. But we had the rights in Freo for about 6 years. And it was during that time they actually tried a couple other things, just like a little marketing business, which that didn't go very well. That was sort of like within 3 months, and then I'd realised I didn't want to do that. And it was during that time when we had that business that I actually started in real estate. So I sort of was doing that and in real estate, started cutting my teeth and learning a bit about real estate. I eventually sold that business in Freo, went holus bolus into real estate. And then, so after about 6 years, went out on my own and started my own thing. So 2007, I started Diamond Realty, and I've still got that business. So that's sort of now, sort of had that 14 odd years, 16 years. What am I saying? No, so do the maths for me, mate. 2007. So I've covered up 13 years, 13, 14 years. And then only the last year, while doing that, I've now evolved into doing a bit of business coaching, which is cool. So that's what I'm really loving and I'm passionate about at the moment. So that's a 30-year snapshot, mate. And there's lots of ups and downs in amongst all that, which is cool. Yeah,
brilliant. Going back to your first business, what were sort of the biggest lessons you learned being your first business venture? Because I'm sure that would have fallen off into your further
again, the biggest lessons I learned probably didn't come till after, later, when I sort of reflect on it, and it was and really it's probably the first 5 or 6 years. So when I look back now, I suppose the biggest lessons was that sort of think more for the long term than the short term when you're creating a business. So whatever decisions that you're making should be more for the long term, and it's sort of like it's now evolved for me to understand that when you're making a short-term decision, it's generally counterproductive for a long term, and when you're making a long-term decision, it's generally counterproductive for the short term. So what does that mean in the end is that if you are constantly making short-term decisions, you're never going to get a better long-term. You're always dealing with what's going to be good for today, what's going to be good for today. And that's probably what I did for the first sort of 5 or 6. Is probably why I went from one business to another and was always looking for the right thing. But that, so that's the lesson I've learned on reflection, and now I've carried that forward in the later sort of last 10 years of my business life, and it's made a huge difference. The other one, probably the other lesson is around, are you just managing what you're doing, or are you actually creating something? So you're just managing expectation of people or yourself, or you're actually creating something. So those two things have sort of held me in good stead going forward, and lessons that I got out of my first, early years in business. Yeah.
So like you said, that only came later once you did sort of...
Yeah. So it's on reflection that I understood that, but the lessons... is when I look back and I said, well, how come, I wasn't going so well in those first years and I was always chasing things? That was probably those two things were the key things that made the difference,
Yeah. Brilliant. So you already touched on this, but you're more motivated by the reward than the potential of failure. So and that obviously means that you're prone to taking higher risks to attain that. I sort of want to touch on the GFC in 2008 and what kind of impact that had on your life and your business life during that time.
Yeah, so it was probably the toughest period, and like a lot of people, I by that stage I'd been in business 18, 19, going on nearly 20 years, because started in 89 and that sort of came along in 2008, and at that stage I'd been in real estate for 6-7 years, and I was doing pretty well, and had acquired properties, and things were going well in our, everything in our life. But then 2008 come along, and sort of GFC hit, and financial crisis and everything. But so it was a big impact. Probably changed the direction of where I was going forward, because at that stage I was at 20 years in. And my mistake that I made on reflection, again, because you only learn these things on reflection. 20, it's always easy looking back. It's hard looking forward in the time when you're in it. Is that I just tried to hang on. I thought, well, I took the old adage that if I don't sell anything, or I just hang on, I keep hanging on, things will eventually get better. How long could this last, type thing. But it turned out to last quite a bit, and it's probably we're 10 years plus forward of that, and there's still remnants of it now. But the lessons I learned out of that, were cool. And yeah, so basically that was a big impact on my world. Lost a lot of dough, had to sell out properties, tried to hang on. Eventually got to the point where cash flow in the business was, really tight, and I couldn't afford to hold these properties, and we ended up having to sell quite a bit of stuff. And but that was sort of probably the turning point of me then really thinking about what I wanted to do going forward. And I was about 45 then. So I'd had sort of 20 plus years in business, and it was now, okay, what's going to happen for the next 20 years?
Yeah.
And so that made me start really thinking about where I was going and what I was doing. But so I had a big impact financially, basically. Yeah, massive.
Okay. I want to sort of come to today in Elite Growth Mastery. Could you explain what the EGM model is and how you've sort of come to develop?
Okay.
What that
Well,
is?
it was sort of, it's been a long time in development, if you like, or purely through my journey on reflecting of what actually helped me turn things around to get to where I got, from me and, what successful is to me. And sort of, so it was all about self-reflection in a game, working out. I was sort of, the reason I got to where I got to and I had these problems was because it was the outer game that I was focused in all the time versus the inner game. And I understood that was a shift, or I learned that was a shift through. And I started digging in deep to understand, what made me tick, why was I thinking the way I was, why was I having the behaviours I was having, and why I was getting the results I was getting. And so the EGM model, which I'm sort of now coaching other people through and understanding, was that, it's the outer game can always be the outer game, but it's how you in the game react to the outer game is going to have an impact on what the results that you get. So for me, the EGM model is all based around building a better you to build a better business versus trying to get a business to build a better you type thing. And the model is essentially around three components: is self-awareness, really about who you are, where your business is, who you are within that business. And then once you understand that at a deeper level, you could understand what you need to change. So then the second component is like, what's the required change to go from wherever you are now that you're not happy with to wherever you want to go that you think is going to be the right place. So if you can establish where I'm at, what I need to change, and then what's the implementation process, and I sort of model that through the four pillars, which are sort of left brain and right brain orientated. So there's quite a bit of psychology in around all this, which is how I understood it and how I learnt it and have now implemented. So the four pillars are, creativity and innovation on the right brain creative side, and then systems and processes and new knowledge, which sort of comes from your left brain. So those four pillars will actually turn out to get you the results you want, but there's no point trying to do that until you understand how you got to where you got to in the first place. And so the model is those sort of three components, sort of in a triangle, if you like. Top left is your self-awareness, how you're getting the outcomes you're getting. The right side is what you need to change, what you require change, understanding how human behaviour changes and why you don't change. Mm-hmm. There's a whole human change curve around all that. And then your sort of four pillars of growth, and those four pillars of growth, what I've learned is they're not just in business, but they're in all facets of your life. And if you follow that triangle, it can actually help you in all sorts of different ways. So as I came out of my woes, if you like, and I started to learn about this stuff. And as I was starting to get the impact and the results, I just went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I really started to learn a lot about myself and how I could help other people in this model. Yeah.
So you've been officially a coach for the last...
About a year, sort of officially, February, March last year. So we're now February this year.
Yeah, but obviously there would have been a long time as you were sort of developing these ideas and...
Yeah, for about 2 years prior to that.
Yeah, so at what time did you decide you wanted to coach other people and help other people with their
suppose it's a good question, and there's no sort of, put my finger on it at one particular time. I was probably evolving and teaching and helping people and people around me within my own business and family, and always sort of had a coaching style, if you like, or mentoring is probably the better word. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until, because I'd sort of had this journey and I was learning more, and the old classics, that the more I learned, the more I realised I didn't know, and so I kept on learning more and going deeper, and I was getting better results, and the business was now flourishing, and I was like, everything that was pre-2007, 2008, I'd now regained, and I was much, much better. In fact, I'm probably better financial position now than I've ever been, and still growing. I think, what is it, just prior to the three or 4 months, I was sort of thinking about putting all these ideas into some sort of book, or just as a bit of a legacy. And it was, I approached some guy who's sort of a guy that I was dealing with at the time, or a mentor of mine, and he sort of suggested I should go to coach first before I wrote the book and find out what people relate to with my message and what I was trying to do, and then from there relate those stories. And that's been probably the best advice I've got for a long, long time around all that, because that's exactly how it's panned out. You know, I've now been coaching, and now I'm learning more from the coaching, which is actually helping me, and it's just like this beautiful little...
That's what I was going to ask. Do you find that, you know, helping other people with their development's actually...
Yeah, and I think
reciprocal as well.
Totally, Jeremy. Because I think the situation, and you know, it's happening really right now. I've got six, and then going with another couple coming on soon. So 8 coaching clients at the moment. And what I'm learning is, and what I've learned about coaching is not about providing answers. It's about asking better questions. And when you're asking the better questions, you get the answers, and you get them collectively. Which those answers that you get actually help other people who are in a similar situation, and me as well, because I'm in a similar situation trying to run a business. So it's quite fascinating how that's evolved, and I'm still learning, and I'm still sort of, and it's almost like every time I have a coaching session, I actually learn something new about myself, about what I should question, and what the feedback I'm getting, and how it's helping that person. So there's definitely an art to coaching, and my style is more not come in and tell you what you should and shouldn't do, more about, well, let's find out how you got to where you got to.
Yeah.
Follow that model. What do you need to change, and what's the implementation? And the people will who are being affected by this or impacted, they'll find their own pathway through all that, you know, and either resonate or not to it. And then not everybody's ready for those changes that are required, you know. So that's the other thing is which I've learned. Yeah.
So it is almost like you're helping them discover it themselves, like along with them, rather than just telling, this is what I've done, you've got to do this, like this is the only way.
Correct. And I think the other part of it comes into it is that depending on what stage of business you're at, depending on what stage of life you're at, depending on whatever else is going on in your world, and there's literally 10, 20, 30, lots of variables that come into, and then it's just a case of finding out, well, what do you actually want to achieve? Where do you want to go from where you are? Because some people have got cracking businesses, but they're just, you know, they're tied to them 80, 90 hours a week. So their goal is, how do I extract myself out? Others are going, well, I need cash flow because I haven't, you know, things are just always treading water, which is probably where I was. And it's like, well, stop focusing on the money and start focusing on being a better business person and a better asset, and the money will start flowing. It's like, oh, you know, what does that mean? You know, it's like, well, that's the stage that you're at, you know. And then other people who have been in business 20, 30 years understand all the technical side of it, but have just got tired and have just worn out. And it's like, how do you reinvigorate, and what do they need to know? So it's different situation, different business, different people, and that's what's so fascinating about it.
Yeah. So I understand you've coined your own word, which is attitude. Could you explain what that word means and how you...
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because when I was formulating my model, if you like, of how I wanted to do this, because I had a good ideas and all things that helped me, but you have to then present it in a package that people can grasp onto.
Swallow,
swallow, exactly, and sort of, because otherwise you just randomly, and even then, like, you got your model, but then, you know, I might talk to you about it, and you'll go, yeah, but my focus is this bit, I got all that right, you know, so you just, within the model, something comes out. So the word attitude really is stems from attitude and energy. And I understood that very early in my own journey, that is, if my what I found when I went inwardly. So this is the sort of a bit of a long-winded answer, but I'll get to it. Is that when I went and assessed everything that happened with me, is that the stuff that was good was when I had good attitude, and the stuff that was bad is when I didn't have very good attitude. And that's what really sort of hit me, was that the times when I was making bad decisions, or on reflection bad decisions, it was because my attitude wasn't quite right and everything else. And we all know that, you know, to have a positive attitude in business and anything in life, that's what you need. And it's very hard to maintain all the time. But then with attitude, you have to bring energy. You know, so hence the word attitude came from attitude and energy, and I'm hoping to brand that one day and make it into something. But so that's sort of the basis of it. The attitude then became the you know, what's the word, the energy that actually provided within the model of, you know, when you're going to do self-reflection, what would require change, and then the performance of the high performance habits that you need to have requires this attitude, which is attitude, energy, that gives you movement, that then gives you, you know, momentum, and then away you go from there, sort of thing. So, so the word attitude is just made up of attitude and energy.
Yeah. So when you, basically what you're saying is, when you strip away all the other things of the model, that's really what's at the core.
Yeah, that's at the core, and because you can have negative attitude and energy, or you can have positive, and then they have their own cycles in and around that. So if you apply negativity to all those facets of everything you're at, you got the result you're going to get.
Yeah.
But if you apply positivity to that through gratitude and helping others and doing things like that, which are all positive parts, then you're going to get that back in spades. So it's and this is where the inner game comes into it, very much so. Self-reflection and what you need to change is very much an inner game. What you need to do to implement it becomes your outer game. Essentially, there's the two splits in it.
Because I did hear, actually, I think it's when you're in a more positive mindset, you're actually more intelligent, so you're more prone to making better decisions.
Yeah, and I think probably the way to for people to understand it differently is that you're on offense versus defense. If you're in negative mode, you're in defensive mode, trying to keep things at bay, whereas if you're a positive mode, you're more in offense, so you're more likely going to create good things, whereas in negative mode, you're in defense, just trying to hold your own, be protective. And unfortunately, our brain is built to be defensive, right? So that's another rabbit hole, mate. So
I might have to cut you off there.
I was going to say, mate, we don't want to go that rabbit hole just now, otherwise we might need another 5 podcasts.
Well,
but yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that more one day.
I have heard you talk a lot about the 80-20 principle,
Yep.
which I think is pretty important in a business context.
Yep.
Could you explain what that is and how
Yeah,
it applies?
so someone will probably correct me on this, but Alfredo Pareto, some Italian mathematician, scientist, whatever, back in the early 1900s, he was the one that came up with what became the Pareto's theory, which was an 80-20 rule, and that, so in business, 80% of your 80% of your results will come from 20% of your effort. 20% of your effort will produce 80% of your results. And this is all in types of businesses. And it's also just a law of the world, if you like. If you think of Australia, 80% of people live in 20% of the area, and just all these things just materialise out. And this is something that that he theorised and a lot of people have grappled onto and things. So if you think back to your business growth, 80% of your results are actually going to come from 20% of your effort. And so then the question then becomes well, why don't we just do the 20%? And why do we do this 80% that only gives us the 20? And what I've learned through my own discovery and myself and the psychology of how we work as a brain is that the reason we don't do that 20% because that's generally outside your comfort zone. So the 80% of the stuff you do is generally within your comfort zone, and you'll get you get results, but you don't get the full result. Yeah. So people who are high performers, who are really top business people on the planet, they spend more time in that 20% outside their comfort zone, which has really given them the impact. So that's where the 80-20, that's what I've found fascinating, that talking to business owners, is that when you find that why don't they do certain things, it's because it's generally outside their comfort zone, and that requires deeper learning, deeper understanding, or making that extra call, or standing in front of a group, standing up and talking, doing a podcast.
Yeah. So like to one person it might be simple and straightforward, but to them it's outside of their comfort zone. It's not so easy for them.
And we all battle with it. I mean, it's a constant battle all day, every day. It's just, and it becomes habit forming and training, or from one way or another. Habits are formed that keep you outside stop you going inside the comfort zone, as opposed to you can create habits that takes you into outside the comfort zone consistently, all the time, sort of thing. So that's where I sort of see the 80-20 principle to help people move along really is impactful if you can get to a deeper level and understand what's happening. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I want to talk about your experience with coaching people, because you would have coached a number of people now, being just over a year officially anyway.
Yep.
Have you sort of had any difficulties with a particular person or anything like that where you found it challenging to make a breakthrough or anything like that?
No, it's not necessarily. Not so much challenging. I suppose that could be partly because where I'm at is, and I'm not just attracting anybody who wants help. I'm sort of pretty, not so much selective, but the conversations that I have, I go straight into this sort of stuff is where I can help you. And some people either resonate to that or don't, right? So the ones that have engaged me are ones that resonate to that. So they've already passed that resistance level of understanding. Yeah. It's only when you get into it that their perception of what is going to help them may be different to my perception of what's going to help them. So you've got to weave your way through that pathway, I suppose. So
that's the challenge there.
Yeah, that's the challenge, because everybody wants to grow their business through numbers and more sales and thing, which is the spearhead of the business. But behind all that is, who they are and where they sit in it. And generally all the problems that they present and say, hey, I've got a problem here, here and here, they're generally surface problems, which is what shows up. But deep down there's another problem that's creating that, and that's what I go in to explore to try and help them fix. And then once they understand that, then they can make breakthroughs.
Yeah. Okay. So we all know that failure is a part of life, but we can usually learn valuable lessons from them. Is there any sort of particular moment or failure that you can remember in your career that you...
Trying to block them out.
Trying to forget them as best you can. That one that you learned a big lesson from.
Oh, yeah, there's lots. I think firstly is that what I've come to train myself to understand now, and what I'd love to instill in anybody that I'm coaching, is that there isn't really any failure. It's just the lessons that you learned from something that didn't quite work out, right? And because I don't think anybody knowingly goes into something to do something that they think they're going to fail at. Otherwise they wouldn't do it in the first place. It's not coherent to do that. And it's always, as we said before, it's always on reflection when you look back and go, okay, well, that didn't quite work. But having said that, you could start a business and it didn't quite work out, and you could say, well, that failed. But the reality is the stuff that you've learned from that is going to help you, if you allow it to, and you see it that way, to help you going forward. So I don't really like using the word failure, because I don't think it's really appropriate. But
so I guess it does come back to that attitude then, how you perceive.
Totally, how you perceive things. And one of the big things is that it's like, we don't see things as they really are. We see things as we are, right? So how we are, how we behave, and what we see the world is, that's how we see it. But that's not necessarily how you might see it, or the next person sees it, or the next person. Exactly the same situation. So when you're looking at failure, it's like, well, if you want to see it as failure, that's what you'll see. But if you want to see, well, hey, okay, that's helped me get to this stage. It's a bit like, I'm now a coach and I've got a really good, successful business as far in for me, but I probably wouldn't have what I have now, wouldn't be doing this coaching, if I didn't have all those problems or perceived failure back in 2007, 2008, 9, 10 and 12, sort of that time, and that's how I look back at that now, and not as failure. I looked at it as a learning experience, which has now helped me make better decisions going forward. And so I sort of switched what I was doing from short-term thinking and not long-term to now everything's long-term thinking. From the last sort of 6 or 7 years, everything's become what's going to be better, what decision's going to be better for the long term, and that's now helping. So now the long term's arrived. See, so that's what happens is that if you start making all the decisions, eventually all the decisions you got are based, all the long term stuff is now arrived. So you got this new continuation, and that's where good things really happen. That's when you flourish. Yeah.
So maybe I can ask it a different way. Is there anything you would do differently then? Because you're saying that obviously it's brought you to where you are. Would you change anything that you've
from previously? Look, I think the biggest sort of probably the thing that comes to mind when I reflect on it is that like every business owner, we're money focused. We're starting to business to get more money than we can if we were to working for someone else, and we've got that spirit to want to work on our own. And so you naturally become sales orientated, got to create cash flow, become a business, which is what you need to do. But the thing I would do differently, and I would recommend anybody else to do differently, is to think of yourself as, how do you become a better asset for whoever you're servicing, whatever it's product or service that you're giving or you're creating. If you can become a better asset to the people that want you as a client or want to service you, rather than focusing on the money, then the money will follow. Right, so for me, it's become very much, how can I get better at whatever I'm doing all the time, keep learning more, understanding, so I can serve as a better asset. And this was a lesson that I learned through just reading and learning, and this thing really hit me, like this is what I was doing wrong. And as soon as I literally changed that, my world started to change. Every conversation, and because I was in real estate, and that's very much a relationship building sort of business, and like any business is a relationship building business really, is that if you can become a better asset and you can then provide value, because you can't be a good asset but also charge 5 times more than everybody else, because nobody's going to want to deal with you. But so the big thing I would change would be, just focus on becoming a better asset all the time, and not focused on how much money you're going to make, because that will just come from it.
Yeah. Okay. You come from a very large family. You have 7 brothers?
So I'm the youngest of 7 brothers.
Yeah. Right. So I just sort of want to talk about your family more broadly, what kind of impact they've had on your life and your business life, and Because you work with your brother.
Yep,
To this
yep.
day.
So I've got the real estate businesses with my brother Mick, and and he's definitely my closest friend as well. So my family life, coming up, we're living in a family with 7 brothers or 6 brothers, 7 of us. It's just sort of that really instilled your values of what's important to me, and that's carried me through. So everything I've tried to do in business has really been around how do I help the people around me, which is that family value type thing. So I tend to always put other people close around me before myself, which is that's a strength, but that also becomes a weakness sometimes.
Sure, yeah.
Like everything, most people's strengths also become their weaknesses at times. So for me, it's had a big impact, and it's sort of at the core. My core value system is all around family and building that, and how do I make the people's lives around me better, and that will in turn make my life better, basically. So I suppose the biggest impact from my family is just that that closest loyalty, look after each other type scenario, which has sort of carried through to business. But as I said, sometimes in business that can be tough because you have to be you can't be that easygoing. You have to be a little harder from time to time. But that's all part of the learning journey as well, though.
Yeah. We're sort of coming towards the end of the podcast.
Wow, is it really that time?
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, mate.
That's right. I sort of want to talk about what kind of plans you have, speaking long term, for the future of Elite Growth Master.
Yeah, so I suppose we're here. What are we now? February 2020, and so last year was very much a discovery year of working out where this all fits into. To what I want to do going forward, and I still want to nurture my current business and trying to always find ways of making that work better. And so going forward, I love the one-on-one coaching because I think that's where I learn more. I've also enjoyed speaking in front of groups, which was only something that I learnt last year. I started to do a little bit of group training, and through what we call it, boardroom mastermind. We'd have 8 to 10 people. We just thrash out subjects around human development and personal development, around business growth and how that all interacts. So I really enjoyed that interaction, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert in front of a group, but that's something that really,
you've learned.
I learned. So I think we did 13, 14 presentations last year, and for 2 hours each one, and each one sort of impacted better and better. I think, or certainly for me, it felt that way. So I want to do more of that. Not necessarily a lot of one-on-one coaching. I think if I get 6 to 8, 10 clients in that range on a going basis, that's enough for me to do what I want to do there. So I'm really exploring now. This year, I'll explore a bit more of the group coaching stuff. So maybe do some 4-week courses, 2 hours each one, and psychology of selling, psychology of your business yourself. And I'm still sort of piecing that all together. I think there's a book in me somewhere, which will down the track.
Yeah.
And probably with the amount of stuff that I've pieced together, and I've got notebooks and notebooks and notebooks full of stuff.
We could do it tonight if you want.
Probably could sit there and piece it all together.
Yeah.
Not that writing is my is my strong suit by any means, but yeah. So I think at the moment it's still a bit of a discovery, and I'm probably in fact I was talking to one of my other mentors coaching group that I'm in myself about that's my challenge at the moment, is how do I model this up to make it most impactful and effective, and look, just without being cliche, it's like always try to impact someone to give them a better business life each time I'm talking to someone, whether they're paying or not, or whether I'm just meeting them and having a chat with them. It's like, what can I tell you that's going to help you have a better week, a month, a year ahead type thing. So that's what's driving me at the moment, which is cool.
Yeah, something else I want to ask you just thought of now is obviously you've got mentors of your own.
Yeah.
Is that a big part of for your own development, having someone sort of outside of yourself actually helping you?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think what I've learned over my journey is that you sometimes got mentors, you don't even realise you've got them. They're just people that you look up to, or people that you're taking advice for, and you probably don't put them into the category of mentors.
Yeah.
But simple things like just reading books, listening to podcasts. When I started in business 30 odd years ago, there wasn't a lot of readily available information. You can go and buy a book and you can read a book, but I wasn't a big reader. But now I immerse myself, and that's probably be the biggest change in me is that the last definitely 2, possibly 3 years, I would listen or read or learn from podcasts, books, probably 14, 15 hours a week, driving around, listening, walking the dog, whatever it may be, is that I'm really always learning. So they're all my mentors as well. So and you can learn, you can listen to a podcast of some genius on the other side of the planet and learning. In fact, I was listening to a podcast on the way here, the psychology of entrepreneurship, which is cool. So there's plenty of availability, right? So these guys can be your mentors. They wouldn't even know who you are, but they can be your mentor. You can adopt them. They don't know who you are.
So even though you're not officially speaking to someone on a regular basis, it's more like you're just immersing themselves in what their thinking is and their ideas.
Yeah, and I think the only downside to that is that you don't have that interaction with someone who knows your situation specifically. So that's where the coaching one-on-one comes into, is that I can learn exactly about what are you think is your problems, where do you want to go, what's your desired state, how do we fix that and help that, and that becomes a mentor and a coaching role. Whereas when you're just taking in, you can then add your interpretation to what that person's trying to tell you or help you. But it's still good information, and it's free, readily available all the time. So there's no excuses for not learning, and the more you learn, the more you realise that you don't know. So it's cool.
Before we close, is there one piece of advice that you could impart onto our audience, however little that might be?
Jeez, now you put me on the spot.
Assuming they're a business owner, if there was one thing you could say to other business owners out there, it's always difficult to pin things because there's a lot, but it's more about, I think, being self-aware of where you fit into it all. Like, if you really need to do work on yourself to understand how you're impacting the world and also how you're impacting the people around you, right? So, because most businesses need people to grow, whether it's yourself as the only person in it, whether you're a solo entrepreneur, or whether you've got a group of people, you've got staff, there's always people around you. So I suppose the thing that I focus on, which is the reason why I'm saying this is so important, is that people make up businesses, products and services are available, but the difference between you dealing with one person and another is going to be the people and the relationships that you build. So if you know how you're impacting people around you, so there's always a good question about, what's the you experience of people around you? So your perception of how you think you're impacting people is not generally this perception that people around you are impacting that you think. So you need to be mindful of that. How do you do that? It's through self-awareness and understanding, asking questions about yourself and how you're behaving. And then once you know that, you can then start to influence the people around you. So people is the key. So if there's one piece of advice, learn more about yourself. Really go deep into that, how you tick and what makes you work. And then from there, you'll be able to get some clearer answers about what you want to be. So it's not a metrics number made of how to get a better sales system, because there's plenty of people that can show you do that. And a lot of people in business, generally get in business having known that stuff, but they don't know the personal inner head stuff. So inner game is what it's all about. Self-awareness, inner game is the key to moving forward, from my point of view anyway. Okay, I want to say thanks for coming on, Torrin. I appreciate you coming down and being your first podcasting experience. I hope it's
How did I go, mate?
Did very well. And I hope I did okay too.
Yeah, you did very well, mate. Good questions, by the way. And no, it's good. I appreciate the opportunity, mate. And hopefully we can do it again. Yeah,
maybe we can lock one in now on camera, so it's
official.
Excellent.
Good on you, mate. Thanks for that.
Thanks.